Hey everybody, and welcome back to the channel. So today we're going to be discussing visual clutter, one of the most frustrating aspects of Apex Legends for a lot of players. And if you don't know what it is, well, today I have Hollow with us today. So Hollow, go ahead and give a shout out.
What's good?
He's our resident expert about really just everything Apex Legends, and he's put a lot of time into the game. And I really think he's going to be able to help educate you on visual clutter, what it is, what the benefit really is, and really discuss it. So we're going to go through some topics here, and we're going to showcase some visual clutter on screen, and you're really going to understand. So let's talk about Hollow. What is visual clutter to begin with?
So when a lot of people, especially MNK players, talk about visual clutter, the main thing we're referring to is just this overwhelming presence of unnecessary visual elements on your screen. Things like your armor leveling up and there being the particles on each edge of your screen. Whenever you kill the kill leader, or whenever you kill the champion, there's that giant like skull icon thing that pops up that like prevents you from being able to see on that part of your screen for that certain amount of time. Things like shooting into snow or shooting into like sand, and then having those dust particles kind of kick up into your face in a way that prevents you from being able to, see your opponent, at least if you don't have a digi.
So what is its purpose then? If like we have all these visual effects, and I guess you could say it's almost like when we went from like regular FPS games back in old COD or Medal of Honor, and then we started going into Crisis, where we started seeing a lot of visual effects. What is the purpose of those visual effects? Why even have them in a game?
So I'm not a game dev. I don't make video games for a living. I play them. But from what I've seen and from what I can reasonably assume, I feel like a lot of the things that we perceive to be unnecessary visual clutter and a lot of things that kind of get in our way were designed for the sake of immersion. A lot of people are not desensitized to the idea of killing a kill leader or a champion or whatever. And so all of these kinds of things are there to amplify the experience of playing the game for people that, unlike myself, probably, don't have a lot of time to play it. And it's just kind of there to amplify the experience and make it a little bit more meaningful, a little bit more immersive, and to get people more involved in it as it's happening.
One thing I want to point out real quick before you, we did videos together. People say we sound alike. So now I'm curious when people like watch this video, if they're genuinely like, is this the same person talking to themselves? Why is Hollow talking to himself?
Yeah, true.
That's awesome. But I guess it goes to the next point. I mean, because it sounds like a lot of things are to heighten the experience. I know I don't like it. I find it blinding. I know you have strong feelings about it too. And I guess it's for everyone to comment. Genuinely, do you like it? And Hollow, do you think people even enjoy this? Like legit?
From my perspective, and the way that I enjoy Apex because of its mechanics. And if you take Apex and you break it down into its 4 core components, it's a team-based, character-based, first-person shooter battle royale. And there's only really 2 of those things that I like about the game, and that's the first-person shooter aspect of it and the character-based aspect of it. Because there's certain characters that I really enjoy playing, and I really enjoy how their abilities influence things. I'm not really as much of a fan of like the team-based stuff because I feel like my impact as a solo player is drowned out, or my impact as an individual rather is drowned out by my teammates. Coming from the perspective of someone who enjoys playing Apex at the highest level of mechanical concentration possible, things like mixtape or pubs, where I get to run around and shoot my gun a lot more, because visual clutter gets in the way of my ability to enjoy the game through that sort of lens, through that sort of standpoint. I hate visual clutter. I think that it's the worst addition to the game in terms of all of its like immersive features. I think that there shouldn't be anything that prohibits me from being able to see whenever I'm trying to hit a 1-clip or whenever I'm trying to clutch a fight, because I feel like me losing that fight is not the direct result of me being a worse player. It's the direct result of a mechanic, or a set of mechanics rather, that produce the visual clutter as a way for casual players to feel more immersed. It's just one of those things where, but at the end of the day, I still think that it can negatively affect everyone. But for me, because I just play the game all the time, I see it happen all the time, and I'm more keen to it, so it bothers me a lot more.
Let's talk about because you bring up a really good point about being at the peak of mechanical skill, and then really where it starts to impact things is that this is technically worse for MNK than controller. And I'll kind of set the stage a little, where MNK, we can't see, if we can't see it, you can't hit it. But on controller, you can still feel the magnetism through this visual clutter that appears on your screen. So how is this? Let's heighten the conversation around this when we talk about balance and fairness for those especially who don't have as much time that play over the weekend, who may be on MNK, and then they have to fight against somebody on roller with the visual clutter. What are your thoughts on this being a fair level of play? And why do you think the devs haven't really talked about this?
I think to heighten the discussion even more, there was actually a clip that was posted recently on Twitter by Abrelali. So what he does is he's in this little area on Storm Point in the I call it asparagus.
Yes.
And it's the aim assist. Regardless of whether or not the aim assist is rotational or whether or not it's a slowdown, he still was able to like detect the existence of the person ratting, even when he himself couldn't see that person, right? And you know, I'm not one to sit here and say that like as much as you know, people will hear me say that, you know, controller aims for you, 4-3 linear, 4-3 classic aims for you, whatever. Like without, you know, me just kind of baiting or trying to be funny about it. A lot of what goes into being good on a controller is learning how to leverage the aim assist to your advantage, right? You know, there's a lot of people that seem to say that it like helps, or say that it hurts more than it helps, and I'm assuming that there is somewhat of a skill gap in like being able to properly leverage the aim assist, you know? But whenever you have like a thermite grenade in front of you, or whenever you have like a, you know, someone shooting into the dirt and you, or like, you know, stray bullets are hitting the dirt, the snow in front of you, and it's kicking up and you can't see that person, or you can use and leverage the rotational aim assist to feel out the location of that person through that visual clutter. Even if it's just like a micro adjustment, I still think that it does make a lot of a difference, because if you're on mouse and keyboard, you basically have to predict that person's movement perfectly. Yes. If you can't see them, because the mouse serves as a much more accurate representation of, you know, how you're moving it, because there's no external help in the form of aim assist. There's obviously like everything is the result of your movement, and in order for you to make that movement in the first place, you have to have visual confirmation of your target. You have to see how they're moving and whatnot. Whereas with controller, you know, that aim assist in those situations can help quite a bit, and that further feeds into the argument that, you know, controller gives you free consistency. You know, just, I mean, a controller basically like lowers the skill floor, I guess, for the player base a lot more, because even in the midst of these kinds of, you know, instances of visual clutter, you still have this element of consistency. One, I'm kind of rambling at this point.
No, it's okay. Let's move on to, because I think it segues to this great talking point as we start to continue to wrap things up about visual clutter, and let's talk about what Respawn has done so far. I know based on one of their last dev panels that they did for us when we saw, you know, early access, is that they mentioned I can't see blank meta. You know what I mean? Insert word there, essentially, for YouTube purposes. But yeah, when we talk about this meta and what they've done, I think we see a lot of contradiction. You know, at one point they reduced muzzle flash, and then they removed some of the things that are kicking up in snow and dirt.
Actually, I want to comment on that. So
yeah, of course.
Back in June 4th of 2019, I believe is when the patch day was.
Yeah.
There was this auto exec that I remember, the specific one that I used was popularized by Mendo, and the person who created it went by the name of Jivorian, I'm pretty sure. I know they're called CVARs, or console variables, and you could put them in an auto exec, because there's obviously no console in Apex like there is in Counter-Strike. Yes. You could put them in the auto exec, and you could do things like disable your bullet tracers, you could disable your muzzle flash and other forms of lighting that were causing clutter, and this made the gameplay experience a lot better. You could even put some like OG like Mendo or Mende gameplay of stuff like that being used, and the game just looks so much more clean. It looks so much more smooth. It was definitely a lot easier to track people's movement, not because their movement was worse, but just because you could see it happening in real time so much easier. And what they did on June 4th of 2019 was they patched out those commands. They made it to where you can't use those commands anymore, and they labeled those as exploits. And then I'm pretty sure that we had to wait around 9 months after that patch was released for them to institute a fix for the horrifyingly blinding muzzle flash that we were experiencing when we were playing the game at that time.
Yeah, it was really bad back then. It was worse than it is now. So when people think about visual clutter,
like not only did they take away our ability to fix it and our ability to make our gameplay experience better, but they then didn't implement a fix themselves for months after, and then even now we still have issues with muzzle flash. I've been having issues with it. I don't know if it's muzzle flash specifically, but the new storm point lighting is definitely messing with me a lot.
It's a lot of this levels of darkness. Like the darker the room is, the more muzzle flash, and because the map is not as bright as it was, and we have areas that have more shadows, it creates this level of inconsistency. Or 1 minute we're blinded, and then other areas where the sun is maybe blinding us, or we see something in the sky that is too colorful, right? It creates a lot of inconsistencies and troubles with the game. And so to kind of circle back to the point where we're talking about them reducing some of this, taking a longer time, but then we also see inconsistencies such as releasing Evo shields upgrades, and that blinds our screen, right? Imagine you win and you're leveling up your armor, and then you can't see for a solid like second because you have everything that's popping up. We see a lot of inconsistencies here of 1 minute that they're trying to reduce the level of visual clutter, but then they reintroduce it, and then it gets worse instead of better. And it feels like there's a lot of conflict of interest of whether the game needs to be immersive or whether they need to reduce the clutter. And it's really confusing as a whole, as a player.
And I personally think that they should just give us the luxury of options more. I would like to just have the option to disable certain kinds of lighting. I would like the option to disable the Evo shield upgrade animation where the entirety of my, on the edges of my screen is like blue. And, I would love to be able to disable the kill leader and the champion banner that pops up, because I have so many kills that it doesn't really matter to me at this point. I want to frag out. I want to hit my clips. I want to get better at the game.
Here's an example of what they've done recently, and they haven't even talked about. There's two things. The first one is, did you notice with the recoil in Apex Legends that the visual flutter of the shake has been, I don't know if it's been removed, or you notice how the bullet tracers don't feel the same, right?
The bullet tracers are not coming out of your gun from a first person perspective anymore. They seem to be coming out of your head, which is where I assume, I don't know, this could be just a wild guess because I don't know how this kind of stuff works. I think that they're doing it to like lighten the load on the server or something, because with how head glitches work in Apex, like the bullets are obviously like coming out of like your head,
yes,
or to some degree or whatever. I have noticed that has kind of gotten in the way, because like the bullet tracers almost feel like they're coming out from like the back of my head, and then I'm like shooting and it's kind of throwing me off a little bit. Like I'll get used to it eventually, but
yeah, it's a change.
It's not as bad as other stuff, but like, man.
It almost makes the recoil feel less, but then at the same time you're still adjusting because we've gotten used to that flutter of movement when shooting, because it is excessive. But now that we've gotten used to it, it's like whenever you shoot a Mastiff, and it's like old Call of Duty or even current Call of Duty, where like a reference where you do something, it's just strictly all visual, and it's a lot of flair, and but it's not really necessary really for the game as a whole, right? And with the ideal world, as we kind of wrap up the video, we talk about having more features to reduce this stuff, to change things, to have more customization, because it clearly has existed, like you mentioned, the auto exec file. So why not give the player the option to either want to be immersed or not?
So many different options that they could implement in the game itself. Like I understand that we're operating off of, I don't even think that the developers refer to this engine as the source engine. Internally,
it's like because
it's a fork. I think they call it resource. I'm not sure though, but it is based on like a very old engine. So I understand that there might be some limitations and whatnot.
Yeah.
But we're reaching the point where this game has almost been out for 5 years, and we're talking about Respawn Entertainment and Electronic Arts. Like these are massive companies that have created massive titles and are generating so much money. And for a good reason, right? Like they've made very popular and very successful games. But we're kind of getting to the point where Apex Legends, you can't even cap your frame rate in the game. Like you have to use a launch option in Steam to be able to change it. And if I want to change my frame rate, I either have to use an auto exec and have key bindings for specific FPS caps, or I have to restart my game, type in a new launch option, and then launch it again. They label these things as exploits because it's like, oh, they give an unfair advantage over players. It's like, instead of taking that away from people, and instead of taking away our ability to make the gameplay experience better, why not just give it to everyone and then make it like an issue of like, well, you didn't enable this setting and that's why you experienced this, right?
And some people may prefer it. Honestly, there may be some people that honestly perform better with it. Who knows? You know what I mean? It could be one of those things where it's like when they limit our FOV, right? There's some people will don't give them that option because then they may use it and they may have a bad experience.
Yeah, I think that the luxury of options at the end of the day will always be better than the idea of spoon feeding people a specific experience and basically just dragging everyone down to the same playing level, you know?
Agreed.
Like, it's, instead of making everyone suffer, why not make everyone happy, you know? Especially at this point with how the numbers have been recently.
As we wrap up, I just want to remind everyone what we covered. We discussed what is visual clutter, its purpose, how it's worse for MNK controller, what Respawn has done, where the future of the game is going, and really where our ideal world is now. So Hollow, just want to give a shout out to you. Thank you so much for hopping in, giving us your perspective, thoughts. I feel like this is a very untouched subject, and I do see it come up time and time again, and I'm glad that we got to sit down and really talk about it. So I appreciate you.
No problem. Thanks for having me.
All right, everybody. Thank you so much. Don't forget to leave a like, comment, subscribe, and of course, we'll see you guys all in the next episode.